we actually write the budget. The governor does not write the budget. He makes suggestions. He makes polite suggestions, and we need his pen on the bill at the end of the day. But the state, your legislators, they aren't writing the budget. So anyway, it's not such a bad thing. It's not so negative. I try to be more positive because when I get into the budget process, people stop inviting me to parties because I get so depressing. Anyway, so state spending from 06 to 12, that first year, 06, 07, that was last year, the Owens administration, and then the 4 years in the middle, you can see what happened under Governor Ritter's governorship, and then the last year you're there with what Governor Hickenlooper did. The same thing with full-time employees. FTEs are what is government speak for full-time. Well, it's not really full-time employees. It's a full-time equivalent. And they judge what an FTE is, an accumulated number of hours. And you may have seen in the Denver Post last Friday, they had a whole thing of a decision that we made at the JVC is going to cost jobs at the state level. Their math wasn't right. That's okay. I'm not going to go after Tim Hoover. The only thing is that that's what this just shows you how many, roughly, how many thousands of employees that had accumulated in the state, and the governor basically brought some of those down. The ones that came down last year were basically FTEs or accumulated placeholder for an employee that had not been funded. And what we did last year in the budgeting process is we just sort of went through and said, it's not, nobody's losing a job, but if you leave that shell of an FTE there, if it were ever funded, it could create another person. And so what I did when I was going through the budget was I would talk to the other 5 people on the committee and I'd say, hey, look, we can pull 400 FTE out of prisons and then we'll still leave them with another 200 there. Why don't we get rid of them? So that's what that intent of that was, is to basically shrink the number of FTE. It didn't really do anything, but it made us feel better. One of the things that we did this last year, and this was under the governor's proposal last year for K through 12, the state, he was really worried about this, the state aid fund, because that's basically the only savings account we have in the state. So he asked that we bump that up because he was worried about that. Quite honestly, I admire his position, so we did that. The other thing we did last year and this was on the governor's, he pushed for this, maintaining the 4% statutory reserve. He was right to do it. During the Ritter administration, we had been operating on 2% or 0%, and that's very scary because if we ever need that, if there's ever an emergency in the state, we would have no money. So I admired what he did. He also ended up spending less in fiscal year 10-11, and then that FTE difference. The other thing you should know that in the House of Representatives, in the State House, what we did was we ran fewer bills than we had since 1983, and that was a concerted effort. And that was really good considering that I was on about 45 just sitting on my committee. Everybody else really, they did a great job. So what's happening? We believe that the forecast is going to come in at about $300 million or a little bit more, which doesn't sound like a lot for a state, but I'll take anything I can get. K through 12 shortfall. If you looked at, you can look at the K through 12 shortfall in so many different ways, but at one point we were looking at it being about 677 million short. Although this morning I was looking at numbers that the department said if you didn't use the discounting factors that we use and you just looked at funding it to inflation and everything else, that would really be about 1.1 billion. We're not going to be funding K through 12 with the full amount, but we're also not going to be cutting that much. We'll probably be cutting about 300 million. And by the way, the school districts know that's coming. But also keep in mind, we also gave them a whole bunch of money just a couple weeks ago, because every year we're required to go back and pay for students that moved into the district, and our schools are growing, so we made sure we gave them a little bump of, I think we gave them millions and millions of dollars. Honestly, we probably gave them about 20 million. And then the senior property tax exemption, that's going to be an interesting battle, because unless a bill is passed through the legislature, the timeout on the senior property tax exemption, which is worth between $90 and $100 million, will kick back into place. So that means any senior that's been in their home for 10 years or more and is over the age of 65, they get a 50% discount on the first $200,000 of their assessed value of the property tax. We did, when the governor's proposal came out, and then in November, and then we got the forecast, we found out that we actually had more money, so the governor's proposing we put another $89 million into the reduction of K-12, which he's not going to have any complaints to us. He also would like to see another $110 million to the state ed fund. That may not happen, but it's a good goal. So it's just a matter of where we are, where we go, and what happens. Now, I always tell people this, and this isn't in my full nonpartisan hat. What is going on with the budget right now, you can't blame on Tabor. The reason you can't blame on Tabor is because Tabor never kicks into effect until we have money. We don't have money. What has been more of an issue for our budget has been Amendment 23, which was Cheri Kennedy's, and Cheri and I have had this conversation, and she agrees completely. And then the other issue has been the Gallagher Amendment, and Dennis Gallagher and I have had this conversation. He agrees completely. And the first 7 years that Gallagher was put into effect, and basically those of you, when Gallagher went into effect, we were paying 30% of assessed property value on our commercial properties, and we were paying 21.9% of assessed property value on your residential. Gallagher went into effect, and it basically became a governor for the residential property value, so it didn't go down. If it didn't go down, I can go into the ratios, you fall asleep on me. Anyway, what happened in the first 7 years of Gallagher is the residential property rate that we paid plummeted, and it plummeted down to 7%. Right now, you pay, instead of 21.9%, you pay 6.9% of your assessed property value on your residential real estate. Now, nobody ever really noticed that during the time after Gallagher went into effect, because property values just went up, and we all thought we were still paying a whole lot of money in residential property taxes, but we're not. So, and I'll leave it at that. So just so everybody understands the way the rules work, it's not Tabor. Right now, if there's anything that is impacting the state or anything, it's Gallagher. So, I'm 10 minutes through. Less is more. Don't you think less is more? If you have any question, I'll be glad to answer it. Otherwise, thank you very, very much for inviting me, and I appreciate your time, and thank you for what you all do. You don't have bacon, but you've got so much more. Thank you.
I'm sure there's questions. There's one right here. Mr. Mans.
I read recently that the tourism funding there's a proposal to reduce that, which to me seems like that's, as you said, numbers don't lie. Seems like it's one where the return can be proven enough to justify the expense. Is that accurate, or?
Well, whomever you heard that from, probably Al White, was worried that our tourism budget was going to be cut. Right, last year we tried to give them $15 million, but because of just issues within the budget, it only ended up being about $12 million. The target this year will be $15 million. That's what we're going to try to do, but we haven't done that figure setting right now. That's part of the argument that's about to happen. But I do, tourism is economic development. It absolutely is, and I get it. And you know what's amazing is it's not just tourism that's economic development. Just to put everything in perspective, the Anschutz Medical Campus, that generates as much economic force in the state as all of the Colorado ski industry. So, I mean, when you look at everything, we have tourism, it's important. We need to keep it, we want to keep it healthy. But if you look at what the bioscience industry has done and the IT industry has done, I mean, we have some incredible industries. And that's part of what we balanced in the budget. This is where being an architect, it comes back, because when you're, and Carl would agree to this, I know, because we were talking. Well, it's part of the design process that when you're trying to do programming for a building, you try to determine how much space every issue needs within the program of the building. And we do the same thing with the budget. And so it's like putting a jigsaw together. Sometimes you have to carve off a piece here and glue on a little bit there just to get the right balance. And so all of that, between the tourism budget, between the dollars that we give to higher ed, which I don't think we give enough dollars to higher ed, but quite honestly, we don't have. But, you know, it's that balancing everything so everybody can go home